Alfred Stern. I am a survivor of the Holocaust. I'm making this recording as a testimonial to be used for future generations when all of our survivors are gone and you can't get a first-hand report as to what happened. I was born in a town called Mukachevo in the Carpathian Russian mountains, which were part of Czechoslovakia. Of course, all of that part was at one time the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. And then these different states were carved out of it in 1918 when the First World War ended. The town had a population of 30,000 people, 15,000 of whom were Jewish. And when I say Jewish, they were Jewish heart and soul, because things were a little different in Europe than they are in this country. If you were a Jew, you stayed a Jew, because there was no way to hide anywhere. Our town had 8 synagogues, from the ultra-Orthodox all the way up to the modern Orthodox, which were the people that supported the establishment of the State of Israel. There were Zionists, which was counter to what the ultra-Orthodox people wanted. We had yeshivas. We also had a private Hebrew high school, which was not run on religious ground, but it was run the way high schools would probably be run in Israel today. The basic language of the school was Hebrew. When we studied Latin, we translated it into Hebrew. When we studied algebra, we studied it in Hebrew. This was really a school that was supposed to prepare you for Aliyah, which meant moving to live in the State of Israel. All this was going on during the reign of the Czechoslovakian government, which was probably as democratic, if not more democratic, than the United States of America. It was democratic to a point where our congressman in our town was elected on the Zionist ticket. In fact, his handbills carried a Star of David on them. He was not elected by the Jews alone. He was elected by Jewish and Gentile votes. In 1939, when Hitler invaded Czechoslovakia, because of the minority population of ethnic Hungarians, where we were, he let the Hungarian army occupy our area, because the Hungarians were allies of the Nazis. To our good fortune, the Hungarian government took the attitude that the Jews were citizens of Hungary, the same as anybody else, and refused to in any way bother us or hinder us. Our schools stayed open, our yeshiva stayed open, our synagogue stayed open, and we were not bothered. We knew that there was a terrible turmoil around us with what was happening to other Jews. We did not know the extent of it or the mass murder that the Nazis were creating. Because even if people came and told us about it, we would have a difficult time believing it. Beginning of 1944, when Hitler exterminated most of the Jews in Poland, in Romania, and every place else, he decided it was time to remove the Hungarian Jews from Hungary. The Hungarian government, to a certain extent, balked at this. and Hitler sent in his own SS stormtroopers to remove the Jews and take them to concentration camps. They just showed up one day, and within 24 hours, all hell broke loose. They established a Jewish ghetto, and all the Jews had to be moved into the ghetto immediately. From there, within 2 weeks, we were transported in 2 trains to Auschwitz. In Auschwitz, the old, the sick, the women with children, and the children were exterminated immediately. The able-bodied men were saved so the Germans could get some slave labor, some work out of them. Actually, within 2 weeks, an active and vibrant Jewish community was totally, completely destroyed to a point where you might as well say it doesn't exist anymore. Out of the 15,000 Jews in my town, I doubt very much if there's 100 Jews living there today, and if there are, most of them are old, just waiting to die. For all practical purposes, Jewish life in that town has ceased to exist. Out of the 8 synagogues we have, I don't think you could get a minyan today of 10 Jews.
Fred, can you tell us about your family and how old you were around this time?
My immediate family was my father, my mother, my brother who was 4 years older than I was, and myself. This is 1944. I was 15 years old. My brother was 19. My father was 44, and my mother was 44. Closer to the family, my mother had a sister with 6 children. She had a brother with 1 child. My father had an extensive family of 2 sisters and 5 brothers.
And they all lived in the same area?
Within 30 miles.
Really?
Within 30 miles, yes. Within 30 miles of each other. Now, looking back, as horrendous as it was, we were probably fortunate that we were not being bothered till 1944. Because the survival rate, even if they took you to a labor camp, was very meager. Out of the whole family, on my father's side, I figure I must have had 35 cousins. Okay? From my father's side, 1, 2, 3, 4 cousins survived. 3 of them are dead today because they died after the war. But only 4 people survived. From my mother's side, I had 1, 2, 3 cousins, and my uncle survived. And that was it. The people that were killed off immediately, of course, were dead, but the people who were put into labor camps were really put in under such horrible conditions that neither the Germans nor anybody else expected them to survive for long. It was a question of how little they could feed us and how much work they could get out of us before we dropped dead. But he had so many prisoners he was bringing in, the Germans, that if he dropped dead, it didn't matter. He had plenty to replace. Otherwise, he'd have to send them to the gas chamber because they didn't know where to put them.
What kind of work did you do?
First camp I was in, we were digging an underground quarry. We didn't realize then what we were doing, but I realize now, I think what they were trying to do is establish a big enough cavern under a mountain to possibly do some defense work. Manufacturing where the bombs could not reach it. From there I was taken to Flossenburg. The work what we did in a rock quarry, chopping rock, I really fail to see to this day what we really accomplished there, except that they wanted you to work.
So you were transported there each day to your work site?
We
Or
walked.
you walked.
We walked to the work site and we walked back 7 days a week, about 12 hours a day. Okay? And then you didn't get any rest, because if any of the soldiers or anybody decided to have fun, they'd line you up outside and just make you stand there. It could snow, could rain, just make you stand there for 2 or 3 hours to see how many would drop dead. Somebody fell, you were not allowed to help them. You were not allowed to move, you were not allowed to do anything. I was in Flossenburg till beginning of April of 1945, at which point the Russian army was getting too close to Flossenburg. Now, with all the problems the Germans had, and with all the difficulty they had carrying on the war, they just refused to give up their prisoners in concentration camps. I don't think it was because they didn't want the world to know what they did, because at this point, I think there was enough evidence already that the world knew what was going on. They decided to move us from Flossenburg to Dachau. At that point, I do believe there was about somewhere between 7,000 and 8,000 prisoners in Flossenburg. Probably 85% Jewish, and there were some German prisoners who came out of jails, a few Catholic priests who had the nerve to speak up and say that killing was wrong. What they did, they put us in cattle cars and started to move us more toward the inside of Germany. At that point, the American Air Force had absolute and total control of the sky. This is April 1945. The war is close to an end. Marine fighter pilots would swoop down and start shooting at the train. To our dismay, when that happened, the German guards would jump off the train, giving the Marines the idea that it was a troop transport. And they came down harder on us. Until somebody on our train had sense enough to take one of our striped prison jackets and shove it out the window and wave it. Those pilots came down so low that they saw it. And they stopped shooting at the train, and all I would do at that point is shoot out the engine so the train can't move. They shot out one engine, they shot out a second engine, they brought a third engine in, and we came near a bridge. Not a big bridge, a small one. And the fighter pilots decided to knock out the bridge. And that was the end of transporting us by train. I didn't realize then, but I realize now there must have been 2 trains behind us, all backed up. They removed everybody from the train. I think, I'm guessing, but I think at that point there was about 4,000 of us left. The rest of them got killed from airplane shooting at us and from the guards killing people. They decided to move us by force marching us to Dachau. The way of accomplishing force marching people who have not eaten, they made sure that we got water, because without water you can't survive. Their method of force marching us was to, every 10 minutes, shoot the last line to make everybody else run. We just kept hearing guns going off and going off, and whenever those poor souls dropped, that's where they were left. Dead, half dead, it didn't matter. They moved us in this fashion for about 2 days. And then we came to a small village, and I realize now the American army got close from the other side. The German guards were so stubborn that at this point, instead of just walking away from us and leaving us alone, they took us into the woods, into a clearing, and opened up with machine guns. According to all the articles that I can read or I have seen or I can find, only 175 of us made it out of there. Strictly by luck, because the bullets were flying. If you didn't get hit, there was a miracle.
You were with people who were older and younger than you, or were you?
Not younger, because when you came into Auschwitz originally, the way they decided whether you could do some work or not is by looking at you. Okay? I had a big coat on, with the collar up, and I guess I must have looked heavier and possibly older than I was. I don't see where anybody under 15 years old, unless they were really tremendous in size, would pass the muster to be put in a work camp. I would say I'm probably just about one of the youngest survivors that went to concentration camp, because I can't see how anybody younger could have gotten in there. At least I never met anybody younger than myself. I met some people my age in camp, but I never met anybody younger.
And your brother was in the same camp with you?
My brother was killed in Flossenburg. My father died in a place called Gross Rosen from malnutrition, I guess. I found this out after the war because my mother's brother that survived happened to be in the same camp with my father. And he told me what happened.
You were separated from your parents?
When you came into Auschwitz, there was no family, there was no anything. You went one way or you went the other way, and there was nothing. If you try to stop or try to pull somebody, they'd club you to death. There was nothing. I got separated from my father in the first camp, a little place called Derna, which was part of Gross Rosen. Some of these camps, they were major camps, had outlying little camps. Okay? This was an outlying little camp, and my father was moved from there to Gross Rosen. My brother stayed with me. The irony of it is that my father died and my brother was killed the same day. And the only reason I know it for sure, because when it happened, somebody in my camp said, "Remember, it's Erev Pesach."
Memories are painful.
Yeah. This thing was such a hideous crime that if I wasn't there and didn't see it myself, I think I might have a hard time believing it. And I don't know how to convince people that it happened. And I think one of the biggest problems was that even if he wanted to run, there was no place to run because nobody wanted the Jews. I think that's one of the very, very strong reasons that I feel very strongly about supporting the state of Israel, because as long as the state of Israel exists, if any Jew is persecuted anywhere, or any Jew is in trouble, they have a place to go to, which is something we didn't have. None of us. Even if you knew what was going on, there was no place to go. There was no place to run. There was no getting out first place, because in those days the only way you could travel is by train and eventually by boat. And we were surrounded by countries that were occupied by the Germans. There's no way a Jew could get a transit visa to even go to those countries. The only two ports were in Germany and Italy, both allies of Hitler and his allies. There was no way for a Jew to escape. No place to go. And even if they did, you know what happened in the war. The United States wouldn't let Jews in. Nobody wanted the Jews. We're letting refugees into this country now, from all over. That was not the case in the Second World War.
Fred, how did people keep up their strength, emotional strength?
I think what happens after a while, the will to survive in a human being is so awesome that I can't describe it. And regardless of what happens, okay, you want to survive and you do everything that's humanly possible to survive. I don't think it's even a conscious effort. I think it's a subconscious effort. To this day, I can't conceive of somebody committing suicide. Because I know what I went through, and I saw what people with me went through. And I saw how they struggled. And when I look back now, I realize how hopeless it was. Yeah. Really. But they fought, and with their dying breath, they tried to stay alive. That's the only way I can explain it, because otherwise it makes no sense. There's no sense or reasoning to it. Because we're getting a pint of soup and a slice of bread a day, and people were dying from dysentery. And they were just worn down, and you saw it every day, and every time you got up in the morning, there were 5 guys in the barracks that stayed in bed, which meant they were finished. You know, they couldn't move. Most of them went into a coma, I guess you'd call it. You know, stupor. And when you saw that, you know that your turn was coming. I mean, how long could you survive? But I'm telling you, the will to survive is just unbelievable. Plus the fact, I could say I was so young that I didn't know what hopelessness was, but I saw older people doing the same thing. You know, keep it up, keep it up, keep it up, they'll survive. And I guess few of us did.
Did you get physically ill?
I weighed 78 pounds when I got out of there, yeah. I ended up in the hospital. I got pneumonia. They thought I was going to die.
But this is when you came out.
I honestly feel at this point that another 4 weeks in camp, even without all the everything, I would have been finished, because I was really down the bottom of the barrel. I don't know where I got the strength to keep going on the forced march. Except, again, everybody around me was running, and I was running the same thing, and you're scared. You don't want to get behind because you know they're going to shoot you. And you know, in the movies you see brave guys standing up and letting people shoot them. In real life, this does not happen. You know, it just doesn't happen. So, that's... I have a real feeling that some of us survived to be able to give testimony as to what happened. As painful as it is to talk about it, somebody has to do it. I did not do it for easily the first 20 years. First of all, it was never mentioned in my house because my mother survived, and I wouldn't say anything to make her feel bad. And I imagine she probably felt the same way. It was never mentioned in my house. My father wasn't mentioned. My brother wasn't mentioned. Is it as though that part of our life did not exist? After my mother died in 1974, I realized that somebody has to start speaking out. Otherwise, the whole thing will be just buried with us, and that'll be the end of it. And that's when I really started to speak out. As much as it hurts, it has to be done.
But you kept that inside for 20 years.
Oh, yes. Yes. I still to this day don't understand the whole thing. I just can't imagine how people, human beings, could be that cruel to other human beings. I mean, you see things, tribes in Africa, they kill you. But the torture and some of the things that were done are so inhuman. I just can't conceive what would make educated, supposedly intelligent, supposedly God-fearing people who went to church commit the atrocities that these people committed. And don't buy this baloney, I only followed orders. Because following orders is one thing, but I saw cruelty and I saw atrocities that there is no way anybody gave orders for. This was just inhumanity in human beings. I mean, the rule was, if they caught you escaping, you were shot. Everybody understood it. And if you stepped 3 feet away from your work detail, they could say you were trying to escape, and that was the end of it. So they'd bring you back to camp and shoot you in front of everybody. But I saw a poor guy was caught. They broke both of his arms, then they gave him a shovel to dig his own grave. Now nobody can tell me that these were orders handed down. This was cruelty in its worst form. Okay? Not going to say I blame all the German people, because it wasn't just Germans that did it. But I'll tell you, there's a streak of meanness in that generation. Because either they did it, or they stood by and watched it happen. And it happened in Germany, and it happened in Poland, and it happened in Romania. So it's not an isolated incident.
When you and others saw these things happening, did you talk among yourselves about it?
You were afraid to say a word. You were in concentration camp, and the best thing you could do is keep your mouth shut. Because if you didn't, you get hit in the face with a rifle button, that'd be the end of you. As soon as you got hurt in any way, they'd take you out and shoot you. They had no use for anybody that was sick or hurt or couldn't work.
So you were a silent witness.
You stood there and you watched it, and nothing. Nothing you could do about it. They made you stand and watch it. And you have to look at it, because if you didn't, you got hit. They walk through the ranks to make sure that you don't have your head down, that you're watching what's going on.
What were the living arrangements like? What did it look like?
An empty barn with wooden slats for what you call beds, with some straw in it. That was it. They had a couple of blankets around some places they didn't have that, but you could always roll yourself in the straw and try to keep warm. There was no heat in the barracks.
Sleeping very close together?
That helped, because body heat, that helped. Oh yeah, that helped. Yep. Yep. The conditions in the camps were, I don't even like to talk about it, because they were so inhuman. I mean, people in jails, worse murderers in jails get better treatment in this country than what we got. Okay? And there was nothing. They didn't care. Loss of life meant nothing. Not as long as it was a Jew. It didn't matter. Because they could replace them. Didn't matter at all.
How did you come to understand this hatred towards Jews? What did you do with it?
I tell you what I did with it. I am still a very suspicious person. I think the Catholic Church, for all its teaching, did the Jews a terrible disservice. They never spoke up through the whole Holocaust, and they knew what was going on. Now, when I say the Catholic Church, I'm not talking about the average Catholic person walking the street. You got to understand that. I'm talking the Catholic hierarchy in the Vatican. They knew what was going on because they had priests all over who were sending them information. Okay? Hitler died in the good graces of the Catholic Church. He was never excommunicated. Okay? If you have an abortion, you get excommunicated. But he murdered 6 million people, and they were only Jews, so it didn't matter. I think a lot of this hate, okay, came out of the churches. I don't know where else it came from. I mean, they say they teach peace and tolerance. Baloney, I don't believe it. I am still very suspicious. I'm living in a free country, and I see a movement in this country, I hate to say it, okay, of the Catholic Church trying to force their beliefs on me with abortion and with everything else. And it scares the life out of me. I have a little, unfortunately, difficult trusting Gentiles because of what happened to me. Now, maybe you can blame it on what happened to me, but I'm telling you, that's how I feel. I take everything they do and everything they say with a grain of salt.
Can you remember, though, when you were that young man and seeing all of this treatment towards the Jews, how did you explain to yourself what they were doing? Did you think that the Jews were bad people?
The only thing that hit me before all this happened, was once in a while, a guy would get drunk, and you'd hear him spout off about the dirty Jews. But you know what? There was always somebody to shut him up. So you saw some anti-Semitism, but it was never, it's a terrible thing to say, it wasn't malicious, okay? Because they really didn't do anything to you. They called you a name. Jews are used to that, okay?
This was in your town, you mean, before?
This was in my town, not so much, in the villages more.
I see.
Okay? In my town, I really did not see it that much. We were separated. You got to understand something. The Czechoslovakian government was so democratic that we had a Czech high school, a Russian-speaking high school, a Hungarian-speaking high school, and the Hebrew high school. And the government supported all four of them because they wanted minorities to teach their heritage, and they didn't want to clamp down on anybody. You know how you read now about ethnic cleansing? There was no such thing in Czechoslovakia. You had your freedoms, and the schools were actually supported by the government. You had to teach certain curriculum that was necessary, math, certain things to everybody. But past that, they left you alone. Another thing, you got to understand society in Europe. Jews and Gentiles really did not mingle. They were really totally and completely separate. If we had an intermarriage in our town, they'd have to go somewhere else because they wouldn't fit in on either side. Neither side would accept them. Because, we think as Jews that intermarriage is terrible, but we fail to realize that possibly the other side feels the same way. So there was I don't remember ever an intermarriage. We used to joke, an intermarriage in our town was when a Hungarian Jew married a Polish Jew. That was intermarriage, and it was terrible, okay? I don't remember it, okay?
But then you got to the camps, and the Jews were treated so terribly.
By the time you got to the camps, I got to tell you the truth. After 2 or 3 weeks, you become like an animal. Survival is the only thing. It's like, hell of a thing to say, it's like a dog looking for food. Survival is the only thing. You have no time to think, philosophize. Why are they doing it? I can't explain to this day why they're doing it. How could I explain it when I was there? I mean, I'm a lot older today. I think I'm a little wiser. I think I have more experience in life. And I can't explain it to this day. I can't explain it why we have the anti-Semites we do in this country. I can't explain why a human being can look at another human being and gauge them for what they are. Not for what their color of the skin is or what their religion is. Either they're decent people or they're not decent people. Okay? I can't understand. You know, I said the other day in a joke, it's a terrible thing to say, that I think the world might be better off if there was no religion. Then a guy would have to have a reason to hate you. I mean, take a look at what's going on in the world. Almost every conflict you have is religiously based. And religion is supposed to teach you love and tolerance. Where on earth is the love and tolerance? Ireland. I don't understand it. Okay? Look at what's going on in the former Yugoslavia. The Middle East. It's religiously based. It's Muslims against Jews. The Muslims have an idea, if you're not a Muslim, you're a nobody. You should be dead.
Fred, going back, if we could go back
Yes.
a little. You said that when they came into your town, they came in very quickly. Nobody was ready for it. There were
They
no
just
warnings.
showed up one day, we saw them on the main street, and the next day the trouble started. We didn't even know what they were doing there. The next day the trouble started. The only cooperation they got from the Hungarian government that I could see is that the Hungarian state police were bringing in the Jews from the small towns, from the outlying districts, transporting them or guarding them, or whatever you want to call it, to get them into the ghetto.
To get them all together.
In fact, we had a summer home out in the country, near where the factory was. Okay? The head of the state police came to my father and said, please take your family and go back to town because I have orders to round up all the Jews tomorrow and I really don't want to arrest you. Because there was a rapport between him and my father, because in this small village, everybody that lived there worked in my father's factory.
What kind of factory did he have?
Foundry, a metal foundry. And there was rapport, you know the old story, you give handouts to the state police, and you know what happens. And there was just a nice rapport, and he was too embarrassed to arrest my father. So he said, please do me the courtesy of go back, because I really don't want to escort you to town. Okay? It's a common courtesy from one human being to another one. He had his orders, he couldn't change them. Now, there's a case you talk about following orders. They had orders. They didn't beat anybody up. They didn't cripple anybody. They made sure all the Jews left. They were allowed to take certain possessions, and that was it.
So that's what you did. You moved back.
Well, we were going back and forth anyway, okay? We just picked up and went back to our house. And of course, the next day the edict came that everybody had to move into the ghetto. You know, one part of town, and that was it. Because they could surround it and guard it better.
And what happened there? How long were you there?
A little hazy, I would say probably somewhere between 2 and 4 weeks. From there, they took us out to a brick factory out in the country, and that's where they were loading us onto trains.
Now you were still together as a family.
Oh yeah, everybody got put. See, the whole idea was they didn't want panic. I mean, they had this thing well organized. And the idea was they're going to resettle all the Jews. You're allowed to take one suitcase, okay? And they're going to resettle you. That's how they got people to voluntarily get on the trains. Otherwise, there would have been panic. And they might as well have shot everybody right then and there.
Do you remember any discussions with your brother and your parents about what was happening?
No. I tell you what I do remember. I remember somebody of Polish origin coming to our house for a handout. Now it's customary in Europe when anybody Jewish came to your house for a handout you helped. You gave him a handout. That's called tzedukah in Jewishness. The guy had a picture of bodies, naked bodies. And what the picture looks like they had fly specks on them, on the bodies. And he's telling a story how the Germans came into the village, removed all the Jews, took them out, made them get undressed, and shot them dead. No reason at all. Well, my father gave him a handout. The man left. And I remember my father saying to my mother, "Isn't it awful that poor people, in order to get a handout, have to sink so low to tell such a horrible, horrible story which couldn't possibly happen? He could have had the handout without telling you this horrible story." Okay? This is what I'm trying to explain to you. It was unbelievable. Who does this? I mean, people have gotten killed in wars, bombs fall and everything. You don't take people out to the edge of the village, dig a trench and shoot them into the trench. I mean, it's unheard of. They couldn't believe it. Of course, I don't think you could have done anything about it, but the point was, so few people escaped that when a guy came and told the true story, it was too horrible to believe. Nobody wanted to believe it. No. Any other discussion? No. Not really. Not really.
And how long a time period was it between the time you left the ghetto and were free?
Well, we left the ghetto somewhere in March of 1944, and I was liberated at the end of April 1945. So it's a little over a year and a month, year and 2 months. Let me tell you something. The dates become a little hazy. Okay? But that's the closest I can figure. The liberation is not hazy. That's April 23rd. That's a matter of public record. And I have a record from the Burgermeister of that small village that I was liberated in that village on such and such a date.
Do you remember that day?
I didn't know the war was over. I really wasn't liberated. What happened was, when they took us into the clearing and they started shooting, everybody ran into a different direction. Unbeknown to me, very few of us made it. I made it. I ended up in a farmhouse, and I hid in the top of the barn. You know, they have a, like you see in American movies where they have straw.
It was a vacant farmhouse.
Oh, no.
There were
People were living it.
So they allowed.
And I hid up there. And I took milk from the cow. And I stole some eggs and ate them raw. And I heard a farmer say to his wife, "Somebody's stealing from us." And they called German soldiers in. And they looked around. And they couldn't find me. Okay? The next day, some tanks appeared on top of the hill. I could see it through the, it was like a window up there. Couldn't understand it. The tanks had a white star on them, and they were marked USA. The only stars I knew of was the Russian star, and the Russian star was always red. The letters USA meant nothing to me, because when they talked, my mother had 5 brothers in this country, when they talked about the United States, it was America, America, America. I didn't hear about the United States till I got here. And all I could think of, that it's a German trick to make the prisoners come out so they could kill them. I didn't budge. Another day, and then the farmer really got upset, because of the stuff missing. And I figured I'd better go look for greener pastures. I left the farm at night, and I kept walking and walking. I walked through the woods. Daylight came. I was at the edge of the woods, and I see all these ex-prisoners walking around. So I said something to one of them. He says, "What are you doing hiding in the woods? The war is over. We've been liberated."
Oh, my.
Yeah. But we got scared, let me tell you. A cousin from my father's side was there. Okay? He escaped. He went home and he told a few people that were left that I got shot the last day. He says he had to. He was there and he's gone. Didn't come back? He's gone. Okay? I was in Germany. I was in the hospital. I think in November of 45. Okay? They wanted to take all orphans, anybody under 18. England was taking in some orphans. Giving them schooling. So ready to go. I didn't know at that point that my father was dead. I didn't know about my mother. And I said, I'm going back home to find out what happened. To go to England, that's going to be the end of it. So I got on the train, no problem, got to the German-Czech border, the Russian-American border, coming back from concentration camp. I had a letter, I still have it, from the hospital that I was sick. They let me in. I got as far as Prague. The town that I was in at this point, the Russians took. They didn't want the Carpathian Mountains as their border, so they took 40 miles of Czechoslovakia and they annexed it, under the excuse that there were ethnic Russians living there. Got to Prague, and the Jewish agencies all had, setups there. So they were in this building. I walked in, and I'm walking out, and a cousin from my father's side, in fact, she lives in California, stopped me. She says, your cousin from your mother's side is a big shot. I had a cousin that went to Charles University in Prague, and he became a doctor. He survived, and when he came back, they made him the head of all the district hospitals because he was a local boy. And she says, unless I'm wrong, I think your mother is alive in Sweden. She gave me an address in Sweden. And she gave me an address for my cousin. I called my cousin over the phone, and he got out. He didn't want to believe that it was me. He says, you're dead. He said, okay. He said, not tomorrow, but the day after, I'm coming to Prague. And I want to meet you. Meantime, he knew where my mother was. He called her and said to her that I called her. But he thinks it's a hoax because he didn't see me. At the same time, the commander-in-chief of the Czechoslovakian army was my father's old office manager. It's a long, involved story. He was a colonel on the Czechoslovakian reserve. He was in a labor camp. He got captured by the Russians. The Russians were smart. When they came to occupy Prague, they formed a Czechoslovakian brigade. He was the highest ranking officer. He became the head of it. He automatically became commander-in-chief of the Czechoslovakian army. He picked me up and he said, don't stay here. I have no reason. He had nobody left. His wife was killed. I have to tell him the sad story. He says, don't stay here. There's no future here for you. Things are not great here. I can help you to get to the border.
You were still a teenager. You were a teenager.
From there on, he says, I'm your home. The next day, I took off. My cousin came to Prague, couldn't find me, told my mother it must have been a hoax.
So then what happened?
I got back to Germany. I made it. I cramped across two borders, the Russian-American border and the Czech-German border. I was shot at. I fell in a lake. But I made it. Made it back to Germany. Went back to the old camp, the displaced person camp where I was, okay? There was some United Nations people trying to help us. I had the address. They got in touch with my mother. They told her it wasn't a hoax. But at that point, my mother's brothers interceded and got her out of Sweden to come to the United States in December 45, which was unheard of. They got their congressman and they did it. So there was no use in me going to Sweden.
So that's when you came here.
Well, I had to wait. You couldn't go anywhere. We didn't get any embassies till the beginning of May 1946. I had number 1 on the Czechoslovakian quota.
So your mother and you knew that you were both
My mother
alive.
knew at that point that I was alive.
Uh-huh.
Okay? It was not a hoax.
But it was how much longer before you connected
Well,
with each other?
From December, I came over here in May. My uncles actually sent me ship tickets. I mean, they took care of everything. But they couldn't get me out because I was on the first boat that left with refugees from Europe. In fact, there's a guy named Meade who's head of the survivors, and he wrote an article that he was on the first ship that came over, and I sent him a nice letter correcting him, that I was on a ship that got here a week before his did. And he wrote me a letter, he said, you know, you're right. I found out afterwards, you're absolutely right.
And when you and your mother met, where was this? Where was your mother living?
My mother was living in Scranton with her brother. They met me at the port of New York.
Right. But then you came to Scranton.
I went to school for a year. Hopscotch. They didn't know what to do with me because even though I only took freshman year in Europe, in most of the things that didn't require the English language was so far advanced in algebra and geometry and stuff that, you know what I mean? So they put me into freshman English class, sophomore history class, senior geometry class, senior bookkeeping class. And I went for a year and I never really got a diploma. Because in order to do that I would have had to take tests. And unfortunately my uncles were old-fashioned. My uncle in Bridgeport said, what do you need all that garbage? You come work for me, you'll make money. You don't need all that junk. You know, they had no education at all.
Sure.
They had no high school diplomas. They didn't think it was important.
Sure.
Now, I went to a private college at night in Bridgeport to take business and accounting. But again, I couldn't get a diploma, and I didn't care. I just wanted the learning. I didn't care about the papers. I didn't care about the pieces of paper. I wanted some learning. I learned enough bookkeeping and accounting there that when I went in business 15 years later, okay, that's what made me a success. I was just after pure knowledge. I didn't need diploma. I didn't know from diplomas.
But discussion of what had happened during those very critical years of your teenage life, there was no
My
comment.
uncles were nice enough to realize that their sister was alive and that we weren't discussing it. And even when my mother wasn't around, they wouldn't ask me any questions at all. None. I don't ever remember any of my uncles ever asking me anything about what happened.
Did you have nightmares, Fred? Do you still?
Well, I got to tell you something. I had them for a long time, and I thought I was over it. About 2 years ago, I started to get chemotherapy, and they gave me some kind of a drug. You won't believe this. I was 61 years old. I woke up at 2 o'clock in the morning. I was afraid to go back to sleep. In fact, I went back and I told the doctor, if the medicine is going to do this to me, I'd rather die. I just don't want it. So he changed the dosage, he gave me something else to go with it, and it sort of cut it away. But awful, awful. I tell you, once something is in the back of your mind, it doesn't disappear. You can hide it, you can put it away, you can put a lock on it. But something is going to trigger it, and it's going to come out. It's going to come out. I'll tell you the truth, I had them at the beginning. Then I sort of got hung up in working for a living and raising a family And it sort of really, I guess it was back there all the time, but it sort of left it. Okay? Came back a little when my mother died. But I think it was more in sorrow of what I lost. How do I explain it? Well, I love my wife, I love my kids. But that was my last hold. Came back some. Then I sort of, I guess, put it out of my mind. And then I would get it a little when I started lecturing on it. But at that point I decided that this is something I owed to people that died. And I have to do it. So, let me tell you something. Anybody that went through what I did is marked for life. There's no escaping it. You know, so many people died, and so many people survived. But I got to tell you, in all fairness, the survivors have survived. Do you understand what I'm saying?
What do you mean?
Nobody will ever make them whole. You can't. Unless the person is totally callous and absolutely doesn't give a damn what happens around them. Even then, they have lost families. They can't. You just, you know, it's like Humpty Dumpty. You can't put it back together again. The only other thing I can say is let this be a warning to the younger generations that there's no such thing as a little bit of hate and a little bit of bad feeling against Jews. When it starts, you have to be on guard. And you can't say it's happening to somebody else, not to me. And unfortunately, you also have to be on guard that it doesn't happen to other people. Because if you allow it to happen to other people, it could easily be next. Because once these hate mongers start, there's no stopping them. And then unfortunately, when a Jew is in trouble, from practical experience, the only one he can count on is another Jew. So we have to support our Jewish institutions. We have to support our Jewish ties to our synagogues, to our community centers, to have a strong, solid Jewish community. All of us can't pick up and move to Israel. That would be the ideal thing, but if we did, there wouldn't be enough room for us anyway. So we have to do what we can here, and we have to very strongly support the state of Israel. Because if it happened in Germany, it could happen anywhere else. And may God help us if it happens somewhere else and a Jew has no place to run. Then we deserve everything we can.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Get it all?
Thanks, Fred. This is tough. I appreciate it. We all appreciate it.
Hey, listen, it has to be done. I hope you show it.
That's the purpose of doing it.
I hope you show
We'll
it.
be here in the community for anyone.
Oh my God, 5 o'clock. How time flies. I thank you, young man. What a pleasure.